Welcome to 101.1 FM WBRULP WFOOLP WVVXLP Providence. I'm your co-host Dhruv Anand.
And I'm your co-host Alejandro Jackson.
And this is the Outta Pocket Podcast,
where we pull conversation topics out of our pocket.
And occasionally go out of pocket. We're coming to you live from the Andrews basement on Valentine's Day, so I hope all y'all had a good Valentine's Day, I guess.
Yeah,
spent some time with loved ones, and if you hear me go for that old school radio jockey voice on Valentine's Day, don't worry about it. It's just I'm fitting with the vibe today.
No, please send us emails canceling this.
Right.
Anyways, so on today's show, we're covering the influences of social media and parasocial relationships. We have a guest on our show today, our friend Joanne Lee, who we wanted to invite on our show to provide us with a new perspective. I know you guys are probably sick of hearing us.
Yeah, that's facts.
I mean, yeah, just us for the last 5 episodes. So, we really want to expand going forward. We really want to bring more perspectives onto this podcast, different people, and get some new takes. So yeah, we hope you enjoy this. I guess a little bit of a different show.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I guess.
Yeah, Joanne, how about you give us a little introduction?
Yeah, hello. My name's Joanne Lee. I'm a first year just like these guys. Thanks so much for having me on the show, you guys. I am on Twitter a lot, so I guess that's a new perspective that I'll be bringing to this show.
No.
I'm on Instagram a bit, and I'm not really on anything else. So that's basically me for this show.
All right, so I guess we'll start with a little Q&A. So yeah, you mentioned you spend a lot of time on Twitter and like Instagram. So like, how much time do you think you spend on social media, like per day, per week?
It's hard to put a number on it. I honestly don't think I look at it that much. Just kind of whenever I'm waiting in a line for like food, or if I'm in an elevator or something like that, I'll look at it. I might look at Twitter for just a few minutes to kind of get like phone light into my eyes to help wake me up in the mornings, just when I like literally need to like get my eyes open out of bed. Other than that, I really don't check social media too much.
Mm-hmm. So like, yeah, no, I feel like I'm kind of the same way. I don't try to actively spend time. I think that's point number one, like, we're about to make here. I feel like a lot of social media usage in general is never, like, an active thing. You never, like, wake up in the morning and you're like, all right, things I gotta do today. Gotta eat breakfast, do laundry, check Instagram.
Yeah.
Like, it's very much just, like, a thing you do in passing, like, when you're doing something else, when you're distracting yourself from a more mundane task, or if you're trying to like procrastinate on work or something. So I feel like I'm very much the same way. Just sort of like in the morning when I get up, like groggily rolling out of bed, maybe scroll Instagram for a couple of minutes. What about you, Ale?
I'm definitely the same. It's more something I check every now and then when just like, I'm waiting for something like you were saying. Or like, waiting in line for something, waiting for the elevator to get to my floor. However, I don't feel like that's for everyone. I mean, obviously, the internet has expanded massively in the last, 2 decades. And I think we now live in an age where the idea that you can come up on social media is very like prominent. Like, oh, you just need one viral video before you blow up and like your life has changed. And so I think like, we can sit here and say that like social media is just something that we check when we're in between tasks and waiting for something. But I would say that there's a lot of people out there that are really trying to get into or use social media as an avenue to sort of change their lives, essentially, wait for that, make that viral TikTok or that.
Influencers, content creators.
Yeah, like I think that, especially from the time we were kids to now, like the idea of being able to make a living off being an influencer is a lot more prominent now. I think it's, the people like Jake Paul, Logan Paul, Charlie D'Amelio, Dixie D'Amelio, like all these people have been able to quite literally change their lives, make millions of dollars through their come-ups on social media, through brand deals, advertising, whatnot. And I think that is permeating, our modern day youth, that, this idea that they can make it big on social media as well. And so I think there are definitely people out there who like take social media a lot more seriously, like similar to like day traders in the stock market. Like it's like very like
Right. Yeah, and another thing, kind of adding on that, we all like sort of, we're coming up on like 18, 19, 20 in our lives. So we've kind of been around for almost 2 decades at this point, which is kind of crazy to think about. But we've definitely seen and actually been a part of a lot of this change, I feel.
Yeah, I mean,
Like when we were kids,
Instagram wasn't a thing.
Like, dog, I had a computer room in the house. I feel like this is a very common occurrence. Like there was just a room, and that was the computer room.
My computer room was just a desk in the living room with a computer on it. So
yeah, and now it's just like you have a computer in your pocket at pretty much all times. Practically every college student has a laptop. It's practically mandatory at this point to do work,
and especially after the pandemic we've been through. Like like everything is mostly digital now.
And above all that, it's just like the internet has been such a big part of our lives.
Sure.
And it's only getting bigger in kids' lives because like when I was a kid, it was still very easy to like curb my computer usage, I guess. Because it was like a literal task that you had to like sort of ask your parents like, hey, can I have some computer time?
Yeah.
Can I go to like lego.com and play some games or something? And it was always easy for them to just say, no, go outside and play. And so that's kind of like what I did. But now I feel like kids are sort of, walking around with iPads starting from like age 2 or 3.
Yeah.
And I guess it sort of begs the question, with the sort of influence that sort of like everyone needs to have an internet presence now, everyone needs to have a brand, even starting from a young age, I want to ask you guys, like, what do you think should be like an ideal age to sort of like get on the internet, like gain an internet presence, start like, culturing yourself to that?
Yeah. Do you want to go? Or?
Sure. I mean, I think like for me, at the time that I was kind of around that age, I started really getting into social media maybe freshman or sophomore year of high school. I didn't really do anything before that, and I think that was best for me. That definitely allowed me to kind of ease into it instead of kind of being with like along with the craze of everyone else kind of finding out this new thing. It was like social media was already established. I could kind of get into it with kind of my own way of like, this is how I want my social media experience to be and things like that, without feeling a whole lot of pressure of like, this is what the new trend is. But at the same time, I realized that with all of these kids growing up, social media has changed a lot, and it will change a lot for when they are at that age of like high school, freshmen, and like sophomores. And so honestly, I'm not sure. I still think that mental health wise, to not get caught up in trends, to not get exposed to potentially dangerous content, early to middle high school is still the best time to really get involved in the internet. But of course, like now at this digital age, you kind of have to get digital devices sooner, not just to keep up with school, but also just to stay in contact with your friends. And so I realized that kids are getting younger and younger in terms of when they're getting devices. And of course, with devices, inevitably comes social media. So while I think that like mental health wise, it's best to get it at a later age, in terms of just kind of keeping up with like your friends and not getting excluded, it might have to get earlier and earlier in life, unfortunately.
Yeah. This is a difficult question for me. I definitely agree with a lot of the points you made about, social media's effect on mental health and how, but, contrary to that, it's becoming basically required in our lives. And how you're saying, children now, like by the time they're in high school, where will social media be? I mean, we have this whole metaverse thing that's on the come up.
Not the Mark Zuckerberg.
So, like, who knows what their experiences will be like once they're in high school and whatnot. However, I feel like I was kind of, I mean, it depends exactly what you classify as social media. I mean, I would call YouTube a social media platform.
Yeah.
I mean, because it's people making content and uploading it there.
And people can comment and interact with it.
Yeah, and so I have watched YouTube since I was young. Sorry, mother. Most of it is, going to my grandma's house on the weekends and just like going on my iPad and watching YouTube. And I remember like summer of like 2012, like I was watching like Skyrim Let's Plays, like.
Mm-hmm. Oh man.
So, yeah, top five game of mine.
What a blast of the past. Let's Plays.
The thing is, and so definitely like Skyrim's an M-rated game. Like it's rated M. It's for 17 and
17
up.
plus, yeah.
Yeah, by the ESRB rating system. However, I attribute a lot of my exposure to social media at an early age. Wait, I'm sorry. What did I just say? I feel like a lot of the reason why I guess matured, more early than I feel like,
Is normal.
Yeah, is normal is because like of watching people just make content on the internet. You pick up a lot of things, phrases, that we just use in day-to-day life.
Remember Pwned?
Yes.
When Pwned was a thing? Jeez.
Yeah. Just like slang like that. You pick up a lot of things about people's lives, even when watching like video game Let's Plays like I was, a content creator might mention how they got a new dog last week, and it's like these things that, I don't know, although they seem small, they really like sort of, I guess, shape people's development. And so like to an extent, I mean, there's always the argument of like, is exposing kids at a young age to dangerous content harmful for their development, and does it contribute to acts of violence or
right.
misbehavior? And so I mean I can't exactly speak on that right now, because I mean I wouldn't say I'm exactly I haven't done enough research into how exactly scientists have found that affects children's development, but at least for me personally, I think it generally made me more mature, and I wouldn't say I was a violent kid or I didn't misbehave a lot. So like, to an extent, I do think social media does have a really strong effect on people's mental health and perspectives of the world. But at the same time, like, for example, in my case, it like really helped me mature a lot earlier than I would say most. And so I'm kind of grateful for it, to be honest.
Yeah.
And, like, it exposed me to some of the things that I love, like I was saying, like Skyrim is like one of my personal top 5 games, and comic books. Like I watch a lot of like comic book explanation videos on YouTube and like just stuff like that that kind of really had me find out what my interests were, and et cetera and whatnot. But then I feel like another aspect of it is like what social medias you get into. So like,
yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, my experience is like kind of similar to yours actually. So, I was on YouTube from like a relatively early age, I would say, but I think practically all kids were like as a generation, we all collectively had like ASDF, we had like Smosh, like Ryan Higa, like just like the OGs on the internet. And I definitely think, yeah, I mean, YouTube, I'd say, is a special exception, because a lot of the people on YouTube are very much like like that is like something they are striving to do. Like that is a intentional choice that they're choosing to create content.
Because it's one thing to it's one thing to post photos on Instagram in order to try to attain a social media following. It's another to make at the time, YouTube videos I feel like used to be a lot longer when we were.
Oh yeah, and that's another thing. That's the algorithm has 100%, over the years. Like you hear a lot of YouTubers complaining about the algorithm, and every time it changes. But over the years, like the consistent trend is to get on a recommended or homepage. The algorithm 100% favors shorter videos and shorter content. Now.
They want to keep you hooked because I feel like if you can only watch a video for so long before you either A, you get bored, or B, you just don't have the time. So I feel like they start to the whole YouTube Shorts thing is
and content's getting shorter and shorter, and that's an entirely separate conversation. But once again, I'd assert that YouTube is a very special case, because there's also a lot of educational, it's not just
sure.
I personally spend so much time on the science side of YouTube, just catching up on what's new in the field, learning some particle physics, or on the music theory side of YouTube,
and also just podcasts, and video essays. I watch a lot of film video essays.
Yeah, same here. But in general, I'd say YouTube is the special case, but I feel like when most people think social media, they think Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. And those are very much platforms where yes, you can engage with larger content creators and influencers, which is a really weird concept to think about. You just have someone who makes a salary on influencing others' perceptions.
Yeah, it's a lot of brand deals and getting people to buy content that they buy products that they advertise.
But I'd say that probably one of the most important parts of social media, to me at least, is the fact that your close friends and family, or even more distant friends in general, people who you cohabitate with, essentially, people you share your environment. I know for sure that when I first found out that I was coming to Brown, one of the first things I did was I found the Brown Class of 2025 page, and I just started following pretty much everyone who I shared a grade with, which is kind of wild that I don't really know a lot of these people personally, but I can see a lot of their life, or at least what they try to present as their life, on social media.
Yeah, and interests.
Interests and hobbies and...
that's how we became friends.
Yeah.
And now we have a podcast together. Yeah. So,
fair enough.
That's how the three of us were introduced to each other through social media, and I think that, through conversations I've had with my mother, she always talks about how, when she got into college, there was no finding out who your roommate was, unless you, I don't know, found out some way to correspond with them, which would likely be mail. You find out what your roommate looks like as soon as they move into, as soon as both of you are in that dorm. And so it definitely, on the flip side of what we've been saying about, social media's effects on mental health and whatnot, it is very beneficial for keeping in touch with people. I know my family in Cuba, WhatsApp is essential for us to keep in touch. Otherwise, you would have to go.
100%. So yeah, I feel in general, this conversation has sort of taken a very positive stance, just the benefits social media has had on our lives. But now I would like to, sort of transition to the darker side of social media. So yeah, what do you have to say, Ale?
So, as I kind of briefly touched upon earlier, I do think the type of social media you're on matters. So in the case of Instagram is photos and captions. That's basically, photos and videos. Yeah.
And I mean, it's changed a lot
Yeah, it
over the
changed a lot. It
years,
used
but
to be-
at its core,
it's purely, photos,
videos,
and videos in different formats, right? And so Instagram is definitely, I feel like, meant for people to show the best aspects of their lives. So, when we get into sort of the dark side of social media, like, you start getting fake portrayals of what people's lives are like through, through the screen. Like, everybody lives in this colorful, bright, rainbow-filled world. Like, man, don't even get me started on Miami photos. Miami Instagram photos got me dying, bro. It's like, oh,
because everyone's always chilling on the beach.
Miami's so pretty. Look at the beach. Miami's raining half the time. I don't know what they're talking about. Miami's, but and like I feel like you when you post like those best aspects of your life, you also can get really caught up in the numbers of it too.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I posted something on Instagram this week, and I'm not gonna sit here and lie and say that like, likes don't that I don't think about them at all.
Every time you see a so-and-so commented,
Yeah.
ding, so-and-so liked, you just get that little
it's-
dopamine push.
So, for sure. And that's another conversation that we can go down and
Mhm.
probably will in a second
Addiction,
after this. But yeah, just like social media's effects on as you were saying earlier, Joanne, brain chemistry and just like mental health, like it really it plays a role. Like, just the fact that you have an interaction with somebody, releases that dopamine, like you said, and like so. Yeah, I'm not gonna sit here and lie and say that like, getting a notification that somebody liked my post, it doesn't like affect me. That I don't care, right? And I feel like it's very hard. We're human. We're social creatures. I mean, like social interaction, whether it be in person or virtual. I mean, obviously, I feel like if there's anything we've learned in the last 2 years is that we prefer social interaction to be in person. But like despite that, I think even virtual social interaction
counts for something.
Yeah, it counts for something. It definitely makes us feel happy because like you were saying of brain chemistry.
Yeah, but if Instagram is the rose-tinted sort of view, and I'd lump Facebook pretty much with Instagram
Yeah,
too.
fair enough, yeah.
Twitter is kind of the dumpster fire.
Yeah, so
And-
that's what I mean. So, yeah, Instagram's very much so, displaying like your sort of best life. I don't spend much time on Twitter.
I don't even have a Twitter.
Yeah, so that's why I wanted to ask you, Joanne. I guess like, what's your experience with Twitter like? I guess what are sort of, I guess what's the,
What's your opinion?
yeah, what's your opinion, and also just like what do you believe the main purpose of Twitter to be is? Because like as we were saying with Instagram, how it's to it's based on a purely photo and video format where you can show basically the best aspects of your life. Like, what is Twitter like?
Yeah. So what is Twitter like? Well, it's like you said, it's a dumpster fire. It's actually kind of hilarious to watch. So I would say, like, kind of tying into what do I think is the purpose of Twitter? I think Twitter has two clear purposes. One being just put like any half-baked thought out into the world, which honestly it has its pros and cons. Like the cons are that like sometimes I'll be scrolling and I'll see mutuals just like posting about what they had as a meal or like their latest mental breakdown, and like am I ever gonna see that on Instagram? No, not really, unless I'm on someone's like spam account.
Yeah.
So was I ever meant to see like a random stranger's like everyday happenings? No. But at the same time, because there's such a low bar on Twitter. On Instagram, I feel like people expect themselves to bring out like the best of themselves or some like quality content because it's going to be like there and very visible.
You gotta look
But-
drippy for the gram. That's just facts.
That's facts. But Twitter moves so quickly. You post something and then you retweet and like a bunch of things, and like your own post gets buried within your own Twitter account. It
Yeah.
moves incredibly quickly. Yeah, so on Instagram, I mean, whenever you post anything, it's so visible and it's kind of permanent in the way that it appears on your page. But on Twitter, even if you tweet something and you're not even that active on Twitter, every time you retweet something, it just buries your own tweet more and more and more. And because of that, it's just not permanent. Nothing that you say kind of feels permanent on Twitter. And there's definitely pros and cons to that. So I've seen some really, really funny tweets out there just because people will say whatever they want. And I've also seen some really random, I guess people just kind of talking to themselves.
Banger tweets.
Failed banger tweets, just people talking to themselves and throwing tweets out into the void. And so there's that side of Twitter. And then I think the other kind of purpose of Twitter, I guess the purpose as people have made it, not necessarily what the original intent was. But the other side is kind of informative. That's something that I really appreciate Twitter for. I don't think you can get as much information from just kind of people outside of your own circle on Instagram, because Instagram is very like friends that you know, like relatives, things like that.
Or like brands and celebrities that you follow.
Right, exactly. But on Twitter, if something goes viral, then you're going to see it, even if you have no connection to them.
Or if something's newsworthy.
Right, exactly. And so because of that, Twitter has definitely made me a lot more up to date on current events. If something happens, then I'm going to see it basically right away. It's made me a lot more informed, although there's issues with that in terms of biases and kind of how radical some stances are and how those get filtered.
Right, especially because, as you said, Twitter is more informative, but with information comes misinformation.
Right, exactly. But overall, I think it gives Twitter users a really good baseline of just staying aware of what's happening in the world, and just kind of getting a lot of information through threads of just kind of any news articles that they might want to look into, any events that are happening and things like that.
Yeah, for sure. Ale, you have anything to add?
No, I feel like that's. Well, with Twitter, like I feel I loosely browse Twitter, very loosely, and most of my Twitter feed is like things that I'm interested in. But like yeah, occasionally you like I feel like you do get like a long Twitter thread that like just engrosses you in like a story of like something else happening, you know, somewhere in the world. But I guess one of the major differences I've noticed between Instagram and Twitter, and this is, as I said, since I loosely browse Twitter, this is more kind of things that I picked up on from being sort of an outside viewer for the most part. Twitter is kind of the court of public opinion when it comes to social media, in my opinion.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I think out of all these social media platforms, it is the one in which people can get absolutely just like dragged.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I know that.
Canceled.
Yeah, cancel culture is a big thing on Twitter. And you know,
I actually think part of the reason why Twitter has sort of propagated so much is because its content is built on brevity. Like, you know, or what's the character, like 300 character limit or something?
Something like that? I actually don't know.
I don't know. But either way, like, it's just sort of like, you know, it's kind of like the sound bite in sort of like news media. You pick something that's something short, catchy, something that's going to get a lot of people emotionally invested, and usually that emotion is anger. And then you just put it on repeat and blast all day. And that's very much what Twitter is. I remember there was a very sad period of time where it seemed that all that would make for news or comedy was whatever Donald Trump had tweeted, you know? And I mean, that's facts. Like, 100%.
They banned him.
Yeah, no.
They banned him.
Because he, like, you know, like, I don't want to...
Yeah, I mean...
But he was objectively spreading misinformation. And, yeah, like, whether or not... Yeah, I mean, you could always say, like, whether or not learning news on social media is a good or bad thing. All that I can say with certainty is that it's very influential on how people sort of perceive themselves and the world around them.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And then I think something else we should talk about is, I guess, a social media that has basically blown up over the course of our high school experiences, which is TikTok.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, I don't even... TikTok didn't happen until, like, junior year, pretty much.
No, I remember TikToks from like 2018, 2019, like end of 2018 or 2019.
Oh, okay.
Like,
Yeah, like early TikTok, I think was like
there was a lot of trends that would show up on Instagram. Like,
yeah, mid sophomore year when
yeah.
what was this? Well, because TikTok came from Musically, right?
Something like
Something
that.
like
It
that.
was either inspired by or
Yeah, like
they outright bought it and rebranded. I'm not exactly sure.
I want to say Musically rebranded.
I feel like it did, but I can't 100%.
Yeah,
say.
it was a while ago.
But yeah, I feel like, in my opinion, it is the fastest growing social media I think we've ever seen.
Oh yeah, 100%.
It became a national security issue. You know, I mean, you know, during Trump's presidency, I just remember them talking about banning it from the U.S. Because they're I don't know. Cybersecurity issues with China was essentially what they were saying. It was like the alleged transgression, and so. But I mean, despite that, you know, TikTok has not been banned. It's still on app stores, and like I feel like TikTok for a while got kind of dragged for being kind of, I guess, basic and like all about dancing and whatever. But like I think there's some pretty good stuff on TikTok.
I didn't know TikTok's content has definitely evolved so much and become so multifaceted. And from, I mean, I still haven't gotten to TikTok yet, mainly because I think, well, I'll make the point I'm about to make and then. From what I've heard, TikTok's algorithm is very effective.
It is so
at
effective.
feeding you what you specifically want to watch.
Yeah.
And I personally feel part of the reason I've never gotten to TikTok is because I know the algorithm is so effective. Knowing me, like, I would definitely sink like hours into just like scrolling, which is something I just can't afford to do.
Yeah.
But once again, you know, it sort of brings up like brevity of content. Most TikToks are like
a minute.
Yeah,
max.
very short.
A minute max.
And
it keeps you engaged.
Yeah, no, it keeps you engaged, and there's, I know Hank Green did a video about this on his channel like a couple of weeks ago on YouTube. But he talked about like the TikTok creator economy and like how TikTok pays their creators and how that's different from how YouTube pays their creators. I learned a lot from that video for sure about, you know, sort of like creation on the internet and that sort of deal. But yeah, I'm not gonna like get into it now because that would get us pretty off topic. But yeah, it definitely informed me a lot more on like sort of why TikTok and YouTube are going the directions they are. And especially, you know, with a guy like Hank Green, like Hank and John have been doing Vlogbrothers since like 2007. So they definitely know their stuff when it comes to creating internet content.
Mm-hmm. Yo, what you were saying earlier about your fear of TikTok's algorithm. So I didn't have a TikTok for a while. And then I made one because somebody who I was in a relationship with before sort of insisted that I make one. So I was like, okay, fine. So all right. So I eventually made one. And what you were saying earlier about like the algorithm, I remember watching Avatar: The Last Airbender. Like I watched the series during the pandemic. So like March 2020, April. And without even searching Avatar related like content within the app, I was getting like Avatar related TikToks for like the longest time. Just from like Google searches or like, you know. And so, yeah, it definitely is like scary as to what these algorithms can do. And then, you know, getting into, as we talked about earlier, as Joanne mentioned earlier, like children now and where social media will be when they're in high school. And, you know, as I mentioned before with like this whole metaverse thing that's becoming a thing, like I guess the combination of all these things could potentially be a really scary thing for the future, like a VR space plus all these algorithms that like constantly know what your interests are and then feed you content and advertisements based on that. I feel like it's gonna I can envision a world where it gets really hard for a 13, 14-year-old teenager to take off the headset for like hours at a time. I mean, yeah, so so that way, yeah, dark side of social media, huh?
Dark side of social media for real. And yeah, another dark side of social media that I want to get into is sort of like, we were talking a little bit earlier about misinformation and spreading news and activism. And I know, like, when I first got my Instagram, or like, sort of actively used it, was starting in like, actually almost like to the day, a couple of years ago in sophomore year. And so I guess that means I've been on Instagram for like 3 years. Yeah. And I think that first year pre-COVID, there was a lot less sort of like, I want to say sort of social media activism than there was sort of post-COVID, or at least what I was exposed to. And I could literally talk for like an hour at least about...
I vaguely remember us having a conversation about this.
Oh yeah, 100%. I've probably talked to you about it before. But yeah, my I guess sort of the summary of like my conclusions about social media activism. I mean, I don't think it's rocket science to say that there is good activism and valid activism on social media, people whose voices need to be amplified, or people in sort of positions of power who should, hear
for sure,
or amplify other voices if the need be. But there's also very prevalent performative activism along, and I get at the end of the day, like, part of it comes from, sort of a good intention, wanting to help, wanting to spread messages. But it's also very easy to spread misinformation.
Yeah, not only that, and not all of it. Like, so I remember hearing stories of social media influencers during 2020 after the killing of George Floyd, who would go to, like, Black Lives BLM rallies and would like take photos there and then like leave, like just to take a photo there,
right,
to sort of flaunt like this like
it's not always from a place of good intention. Sometimes it's from a place of getting clout on the internet, and
that's unfortunate, but
it is unfortunate. And another thing, like going back to the spreading of misinformation, I don't know if you guys saw this, but way back in the day, there's this one graphic about sort of like Help India Breathe. And there's this huge
What'd you say?
Help India Breathe.
Oh, okay.
There was like this huge like fundraiser graphic going around, like doing the rounds on people's Instagram stories, where you tap on it and donate money because India was getting particularly hard hit with COVID. And, it was sort of just raising funds for hospitals, vents, O2, things like that. And then like a week later, the second graphic that ran was like, don't donate to the first graphic, because people looked into the organization, and that organization was not registered as a non-profit in India. So there were very limited things they could have done with the funds. So it's like a very dangerous game, because it is so easy to take advantage of like, trends on the internet, and it's very easy to influence people who want to be seen as like, oh, look at me, I'm doing a good thing by posting this on my story. As I said, I could talk a lot about it, and I'm not gonna get into it because that could get me like canceled. But more than just activism, the sort of performance aspect of social media is another thing that I think really affects not only people's mental health, but people around them, because
In what sense?
we mentioned today, like, it's Valentine's Day, and all day we've just been seeing like couples on the internet, like just happy people living their best lives, and like obviously that's great. Like, it's great to see people out there just like enjoying themselves and being in a relationship in some sense. But there's also sure like people who sort of feel like inadequate, just like, oh man, like I'm not in a relationship yet, or like even more than that. That's just like one example.
Yeah.
You mentioned Miami beaches. You see all these people like chilling on the beach, like golden hour, like gorgeous pictures. There's people like, man, why can't I look like that? Why can't I be that skinny? Or like, why can't I be that muscular? Why can't I go on vacations? Why do I never have time? I'm just scrolling here on Instagram at my job. And you start falling into that loop of like, oh man, why can't? And that is definitely a big, like, I feel like that's a big argument to be had against social media. But not on the flip side. There's people who are creating the content, and whether you're a big content creator or whether you're just like, average people like us just trying to post, you mentioned earlier that Instagram is very permanent. And so it sets the expectation that whatever you post on the gram, it has to be drippy, it has to be fly, it has to be whatever.
I'd be archiving all my content, all my posts. Yeah.
But like, there's sort of that pre-established expectation that you put like your ideal perfect version of yourself and your life on Instagram, no matter how unrealistic it may be. And I feel like for a lot of people that sort of sets the expectation like, oh man, like no one ever, it looks like everyone's living the dream. And then there's just, me, like, why does my life suck so much in comparison to what I see on Instagram?
Well, I think that depends, because, like you mentioned earlier, Joanne, like, a lot of people have, like, spam accounts or, like, the priv, where, like, all of it is, like, simply for, like, people that they, I guess, deem to be worthy of seeing, like, a certain aspects of their life. And so, like, I feel like there are two very, I feel like there are actually several niches on social media. So like obviously I feel like a lot of it is, this influencer lifestyle with these like really grandiose views and just snapshots of life. I then think there's like people who, want to keep in touch with like those closest to them, so like those private accounts. And there's the meme accounts, which is another niche within social media.
Spam accounts.
Yeah, spam and privs are pretty awesome. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I definitely agree, and I think, and I'm just thinking about my own Instagram, and I think if you like ever like go look at my Instagram, it's just like, I don't even know what to call it, but
you have like a combination of a meme,
like,
a spam, and like
and like a regular. I feel like it's like Twitter, but like
Instagram,
but on Instagram.
That's actually something I kind of wanted to touch upon with you, but I guess I never directly got there. You don't come across to me as a type of person who's very invested in social media.
I'm not.
So like that's, I guess that's part of what I wanted to touch upon when like asking you these questions is like, because like for me, I like I said earlier, like I wouldn't say I'm too into social media. Like I rarely ever post, but I wouldn't lie if I said that like if I go on a vacation, I don't try to take like one or two good photos like for the Instagram. Mm-hmm. I feel like I am subject to those influences. But like you come across as that person who doesn't really care.
Yeah, I mean it's definitely evident in my posts. You can see that I really do not care. Crab carcinization, but it's half purposeful, half not. The purposeful part is that when I made an Instagram account, I went in knowing that everybody was warning me, like, if you go on Instagram, you might get sucked into, like, wanting the likes and the comments. Like, you might see the other people living their best lives and, like, feel jealous. Like, you might get insecure. And going into Instagram, I literally just wanted to be on Instagram to follow meme accounts. And so I set a rule for myself at the beginning, which is that I would never post a picture of myself. I would only post whatever meme made me laugh the hardest, like, I don't know, whatever time that I was looking at social media. So that's how I started. Now I do have a few pictures of myself on Instagram, but I always make sure that I'm posting out of pure impulse. I really don't want to think about it because then I think it puts pressure on myself to look at the comments and to want the likes. As long as it's purely out of impulse of like, oh, that was kind of a fun day, and then just like post and like not think about it, then it's fine. So my Instagram is a lot of random memes that made me laugh. Today I posted a picture of my dog that my parents sent me, and I thought it was really cute. I posted that. I haven't a clue how many likes it has, and I don't really care.
Yeah, no, like going back to the positive side of Instagram or just social media in general, literally I think like one of the earliest conversations we ever had was me commenting on your meme about carcinization.
Yeah.
And then literally from that, I made like one of my best friends for like life, you know?
Right, exactly.
So like social media at the end of the day is a tool, and what it gets used for depends on who's using it and for what purposes. But we mentioned very, very early on in the intro about sort of like parasocial relationships on Instagram.
For sure.
And that being part of the dark side, or not just Instagram, on social media. And it very much, I think, has to do with like, you know, we were talking about the stress to come up with content. Celebrities are always putting out content, it seems, especially those with big followings. I mean, once you get to a certain level, it doesn't even feel like it's like the celebrity themselves on the social media. They probably have like social media managers or like someone else running their account.
PR.
And I feel with social media, it is 100% democratized, like sort of like who can have access to whose lives. So I feel like nowadays it's very easy to find yourself or think that you're close to a celebrity or like, you know, someone who you don't actually know in real life, but you're following on social media because you get to see so much of their lives and their sort of happenings on Instagram. And it's very easy to get like fanaticized about it. Yeah, like what do you guys think?
I think, yeah, definitely. And I think when we think of these parasocial relationships, I feel like Instagram always comes to mind the most because, like, as we talked about earlier, it's very much catered to taking a snapshot of, you know, the best aspects of your life. So when it comes to these celebrities and like taking photos of them on tour, or like, you know, at an event, it's very easy for some people to look up to those celebrities to think like, I wish I were there, like I wish I were at that concert, like I want to meet them, like, you know, right?
But it's also like content like, oh, like here's a bathroom selfie or me at home.
Yeah,
that makes you
for
feel
sure.
like very much a
Like
part of their life.
Yeah. But where I was going with this was that I feel like Instagram is kind of not as detrimental to strengthening these parasocial relationships, because I feel like I hope it's not far-fetched to say that I guess having such a strong admiration for somebody who you don't really know, like just through a screen, I can't say is exactly healthy, and that's of my opinion. I think that you have to learn how to like distance yourself from, I guess, you know, getting so attached to just essentially a photo of somebody you don't even know. You don't know what goes on in their personal life.
Right.
So, but I think it's even easier on platforms like like YouTube and TikTok, where it's videos and you watch them like talk and like let's play, as opposed to a photo. I feel like a video makes it even more real. So like I remember I was watching a YouTuber the other day, and he was expressing how he would get emails sometimes to like an email he had made for his YouTube of people saying that that his videos like helped them through their depression and like all these messages like, you know, that I don't know where I'd be if it weren't for you and like your videos. And he talked about how he doesn't even know them. Like they're sending him all these emails expressing these really I guess sentimental messages, and he's never even spoken to them a day in his life. It's literally just them watching his videos and feeling like this attachment to him.
Straight up Thanos, I don't even know who you are.
Yeah, like, and he pretty much explicitly said like, he's like, yeah, I had to close the email because like I'm not like I never started creating content with the intention to be these people's therapist. And he says, and he talked about how he was appreciative of the fact that, you know, he could make somebody's life a little better through his content, but that, you know, his content was never intended to be like a pure, I guess, like alternative to, you know, seeking help for things like depression, like anxiety. So when it comes to these parasocial relationships, I was saying, you know, of my opinion, that I don't think it's exactly healthy to be, you know, so attached to these creators behind the screen. You start to become dependent, and you know, part of, you know, one of the things we talked about in one of our previous episodes was how, like, for example, when like content creators and celebrities aren't around forever. And so like, I guess the point I'm sort of making my way to is like, when it comes to getting so attached, what would these individuals do if that person disappeared tomorrow? And like, how would that affect their lives? And how would that you know, change the way in which they cope? Because essentially, you know, I guess one of the biggest issues with parasocial relationships is it's used as like a way to like cope with issues. And so
no, and I think like in general, I would say that maybe parasocial relationships like this existed in the past, but I feel like just the advent of social media has enabled it to like on a never before seen degree, you know. Like I feel like in the 1700s or whatever, it's not possible to be like, oh my god, George Washington, you know. But now it's very much like oh my god, Harry Styles or whatever.
No, like you were saying, so like, for example, like even like in the 80s, right? Sure, you might have a poster of
Michael Jackson.
Yeah, of like, yeah, the king of pop, or I don't know, just like, but you wouldn't have gotten those like bathroom selfies like you were saying, where like you really feel like you're a part of their lives, or like, you know, like YouTubers that make daily vlogs where the whole point is that you see what they do on a daily basis in their lives. And so when it comes to,
we're podcasters who make weekly podcast episodes.
Which yeah, man. Briefly, yeah, and like with the podcast, like, you know, we like recently made this website, and like, it was nice to see the big like influx of like viewers and visitors on the site at first, right? And like, these things fade, obviously, and they don't stay forever. So like, it's very important to like not get attached to the numbers. But that's sort of a tangential aside. As I was saying, like, yeah, so, you know, I do believe that parasocial relationships don't necessarily have to be a new thing that comes with the age of social media, but I would agree that parasocial relationships have definitely amplified it exponentially, like the degree at which these relationships form, develop, and affect people's lives. Yeah. Do you have any thoughts on the matter? Or have you dealt with, I guess, talking to people, or just, I don't know, what's your like take on parasocial relationships?
Yeah, so I would say I have definitely had experiences with parasocial relationships personally, but I think they've been very positive for the most part. I think just because it's in moderation. Being on Twitter, I have seen it go way past moderation. I've seen what happens
Stan accounts.
Yeah, I was on Killing Eve Twitter, and the occasional like K-pop Twitter like tweet comes like viral, and I have to see it. I've seen what it looks like when it gets extreme, and it's not pretty. But Personally, I mean, I do it in moderation in that it kind of comes in spurts. Like, I'll find someone that I think is really cool, and I'll like really be following their Instagram for a while. I'll be keeping up, and then I just kind of lose interest and it falls away. But during that time, it is really nice. I think, like you were saying, like you get like selfies or like kind of like you get a look into their home life. And for me, I do like that. I think it's just kind of nice to have someone, of course, like at least for me, whenever I get attached to like a person or an actor that I don't know, I am always very aware of the fact that I have no idea who they are as a person, but I'm very comfortable with the idea of I can be attached to the idea of them as a concept or a character, and how that character can bring comfort if I'm having a hard time. And I think it's just kind of coming from the need to have like unconditional, like just someone always being there for you who doesn't really have any flaws. Because of course, with these celebrities who are putting images of themselves, like of themselves out on social media, they're not going to include flaws of themselves.
Yeah.
And because of that, it's kind of nice to have that presence in the back of your mind where it's like, oh, you know, this person / this character, this concept, what would they say in this situation? Or like, oh, like even if like things are really just kind of going downhill, like this person would theoretically be by my side, and there's comfort in that. There's also just the fact in that, I mean, people want to love each other, and there's a lot of love building up, like love of any kind, just like platonic, romantic, anything. And it's nice just to have somewhere to put it for a little bit, because sometimes it can get really frustrating if it builds up and up and up, but everyone around you is a real person, a real person, and you can't just unload that onto somebody. And if you just kind of have like a flawless character or a concept to kind of hold on to that for a little bit while you can take a break, it can be nice.
Yeah, I think the key word is in moderation. I think
In
everything
moderation,
in
for
life
sure.
Moderation.
is in moderation. You have to have the self-awareness to, like you said, be able to recognize.
It's not actually that person.
Yeah.
TLDR, social media in moderation.
Yeah,
That's
essentially, that's essentially the conclusion we come to. I mean, like we've talked about over the course of the episode, social media has its benefits and its issues, and so
Yeah.
obviously it's ever growing and ever changing, and we can only see where it goes. I mean, you know, it's taken over a lot of aspects of our life: pop culture, communication, politics.
Yeah.
So many
you
aspects.
name it. Yeah.
And so, you know, at this point, we kind of just have to learn to live with it and you know, be careful with its vices, but also play to its strengths and like its ability to unite us around the world. So.
Yeah, no. Definitely. Joanne, do you have any last comments to add?
Not really, just I think the key sentence here is in moderation. Social media in moderation. Yeah.
So true, bestie. Yeah, I think that, pretty much that's our time.
Yeah.
So, Joanne, we wanted to thank you so much for coming on to the
thank you so much.
Outta Pocket Podcast.
Thank you for having me on.
Of course.
It's been a blast, and it's always a pleasure talking to you too. You've been listening to 101.1 FM, WBRULP, WFOOLP, WVVXLP Providence.
We just wanted to let you know, recently, we opened up the Outta Pocket Podcast website. So that's www.theoutapocketpodcast.com. That's Outta, OUTTA.
Yep.
Check that out for all of our episodes.
And on the website, we have a contact us page. So if you could shoot us an email on there, let us know what you like, what you don't like, what you want to see more of. We'd love to hear your thoughts on the show. Thank you for tuning into the Outta Pocket Podcast. We'll see you next week. And remember, do hugs, not drugs.
Catch you guys later, and take care.